Ahsoka Tano should have been far from Coruscant when the Republic reached its breaking point. Instead, a trail of fractured signals, stolen military codes, and Rex's warning pulled her back toward the capital one step earlier than fate intended. She arrived in secret, hidden among supply traffic and refugee lanes, carrying only instinct, 2 lightsabers, and the growing fear that the war was ending in exactly the wrong way. Coruscant did not feel like victory. It felt like a trap waiting to close. Clone patrols moved with strange urgency. Senate security doubled without explanation. Temple channels flickered, then vanished. Even the air and the lower levels carried tension, as if the whole planet knew something terrible was approaching but could not name it. Ahsoka followed the pattern instead of the rumors. Every false order, every sealed route, every scrambled report pointed toward one place: the Chancellor's District. What she found there chilled her. Secret movements into the Senate Tower. Red Guard units placed far beyond normal range. Restricted files tied to clone behavioral protocols. And buried beneath it all, traces of a name she never expected to see confirmed. Sidious. For months, maybe years, the dark side had circled the edges of every disaster in the war. Now, Ahsoka saw the shape clearly. Palpatine was not just hiding from the chaos, he was standing at its center. The Republic had not been collapsing around him, it had been collapsing for him. She tried to warn the Jedi Temple through secure channels, but answers came back late, distorted, or blocked. Something inside the command net was already turning. Time was running out. If she went to the Council, she might arrive too late. If she moved alone, she might die without proof. But one name changed everything. Anakin Skywalker was on his way to see Palpatine. Ahsoka knew what that meant. Whatever game the Chancellor had been playing, Anakin was part of the endgame. If Palpatine reached him first, the Jedi would lose more than a battle. They would lose the one man powerful enough to tilt the future. So Ahsoka made the choice no one had ordered. She did not go to the temple. She did not call for help. She broke into the Senate Tower herself, following the dark current straight to the source. Alone and unseen, and behind the highest doors in the Republic, Darth Sidious was waiting. She broke into the Senate Tower herself, following the dark current straight to the source, alone and unseen. And behind the highest doors in the Republic, Darth Sidious was waiting. Palpatine did not seem surprised when Ahsoka entered his private chamber. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, calm, like a ruler admiring his reflection in glass. The city glowed beneath him. Traffic streamed across the night. Far below, the Republic believed it had one more morning left. He called her by name before she spoke a word. That was how the trap truly began. Palpatine did not attack. He talked. He spoke of the Jedi's fear, of their blind loyalty to old rules, of how they had abandoned her when she needed them most. He used every wound precisely. Barriss, the trial, the Council's silence, Anakin's anger. He did not need to invent pain. He only needed to open doors she had already sealed inside herself. Ahsoka listened. Every second bought her time to see the room, the exits, the hidden guards, the data console beside his desk. She felt the dark side pressing against the edges of his words, trying to turn truth into poison. That was the danger with Palpatine. He did not lie by replacing reality. He lied by twisting what already hurt. Then he turned to Anakin. Palpatine told her Skywalker was already breaking. He said the Jedi had driven him there through distrust and pride. He said Anakin's fear for Padme would soon become the final wound that opened him to a greater power. If Ahsoka cared for him at all, she would step aside and let destiny take its course. That was when she understood Palpatine's real weapon. Not lightning, not the Senate, not the clone army. Fear. He found the one thing a person could not bear to lose, then built a prison around it. But Ahsoka had changed since leaving the Order. She had learned how to stand inside pain, without letting it define her. She had walked away from betrayal once and survived. She would not become another piece on his board now. She ignited both sabers, green-white light flooding the chamber. Palpatine smiled. "Good," he said. "Let us see what Master Skywalker failed to teach you." The insult did not break her. It sharpened her. Ahsoka lunged, not with anger, but with purpose, forcing the Sith Lord back from the console before he could trigger whatever came next. Then the chamber doors sealed shut. Coruscant held its breath, and across Coruscant, secret command lines began to wake. Then the chamber doors sealed shut. Coruscant held its breath, and across Coruscant, secret command lines began to wake. The duel began like a hunt. Palpatine moved through the shadows with terrifying speed, his red blade flashing in fragments. Each strike aimed not to overpower Ahsoka, but to herd her where he wanted. He knew the room. He knew the angles. He knew how long he could play with her before events overtook them both. Ahsoka felt that immediately. This was not Maul, not an angry killer showing his hand. Sidious fought like the war itself. Every motion carried layers. A feint became a trap. A retreat became an attack. Even his silence had pressure, as if the dark side were trying to crush thought before action. So she changed the battle. Instead of meeting power with power, Ahsoka moved. She turned his chamber into broken rhythm. Tables split. Glass walls shattered. Statues collapsed. She drove the fight away from his center, forcing him to react, forcing him to lose control of the duel. That was her only path. If she let him dictate the pace, she would die. Palpatine answered with fury. Lightning ripped across the floor, tearing metal open and hurling molten sparks into the air. Ahsoka rolled through the blast, one saber catching the edge of the storm while the other cut apart a security pillar. Smoke filled the room. Emergency lights flashed. For a heartbeat, the Chancellor's office looked like the throne room of a monster revealed. Then, Palpatine dropped the mask. His voice twisted. His face hardened into open hate. The kindly leader vanished, and the Sith Lord beneath came fully alive. He attacked with both blade and force, slamming Ahsoka through a holomap display, ripping railings from the floor, trying to crush her beneath the weight of raw, dark power. Still, she rose. She had survived exile and war. She would survive this monster too, now. Bruised, burning, half-blind from sparks and smoke, Ahsoka saw one opening. The main chamber fed directly into the Senate's shadow galleries, maintenance paths running above the central rotunda. If she could force him there, witnesses might see the truth before he silenced her forever. So she baited him. One backward step, one lowered guard, one look of weakness. Sidious took it. He drove her through the shattered wall and into the dark spine above the Senate chamber. Below them, the Republic slept on. Above it, alone in the shadows, Ahsoka Tano forced Darth Sidious into the open. He drove her through the shattered wall and into the dark spine above the Senate chamber. Below them, the Republic slept on. Above it, alone in the shadows, Ahsoka Tano forced Darth Sidious into the open. Anakin Skywalker reached the Senate Tower too late to stop the duel from changing history. By the time he arrived, alarms screamed through the upper sectors, clone security teams were redirected, and terrified aides fled levels they did not know existed. He raced upward through sealed corridors, feeling something impossible through the Force. Ahsoka and darkness. Pure, towering darkness. He found them above the Senate chamber, where shattered beams and broken machinery hung over the rotunda like the ribs of a dead giant. Ahsoka was bleeding from the brow and favoring one leg, but she was still moving. Palpatine was no longer pretending to be Chancellor. His face was twisted, his robe torn, his blade bright with murder. For one terrible second, Anakin froze. Nothing in him was steady anymore. Everything he had been told, everything he had feared, everything he had suspected but never allowed himself to believe, it all crashed into place at once. The mentor who had guided him and praised him was the Sith Lord the Jedi had hunted through the war. Palpatine saw the realization in his eyes and moved at once. He called Ahsoka a traitor. He said she had attacked him to destroy the Republic. He said the Jedi were turning against Anakin and Padme. The words came fast, desperate now, because Sidious was losing control of the story. Ahsoka did not waste breath arguing. She attacked. She drove Palpatine back with a storm of spinning strikes, forcing him to defend, not manipulate. Anakin watched her push through pain, fear, and a duel she should never have survived alone. Then Palpatine unleashed lightning with both hands, enough power to throw her off the beam and into empty air. Anakin moved too late, but Ahsoka did not fall. She caught the edge with one hand, swung up, and drove one saber through Palpatine's guard. The second blade came across his chest, hard and final. The Sith Lord staggered back. For the first time, Darth Sidious looked shocked. Then he fell into the Senate abyss below. Silence followed. Not peace, shock. Anakin stared at Ahsoka as if the galaxy had split open. She had done what the Jedi Council, the Senate, and the Republic had failed to do. She had killed Palpatine. But below them, the emergency channels were already activating. And somewhere deep in the clone command network, Order 66 was beginning anyway. She had killed Palpatine. But below them, the emergency channels were already activating. And somewhere deep in the clone command network, Order 66 was beginning anyway. Palpatine's death should have stopped everything. Instead, it ripped the hidden machinery loose all at once. The moment his body vanished into the Senate depths, sealed protocols flooded the Republic command net. Emergency orders hit fleets, battalions, and security hubs before truth could travel. To most clone officers, the signal came without explanation. Execute Order 66. Ahsoka heard the words through a shattered comlink before the first shots were fired across the city. She understood the danger. Palpatine had built the Purge to survive him long enough to bury the Jedi beneath confusion and fear. If the Order died now, the Sith would still win, even with Sidious dead. Anakin understood something terrible. If the command spread first, the Jedi would never explain what happened in the tower. Coruscant would wake to a dead Chancellor, a burning Senate, and reports claiming Jedi treason. The Republic would believe the lie because the lie had already been prepared. So they split the mission. Ahsoka ran for the Senate broadcast grid with Palpatine's own security codes. Anakin raced for the temple, desperate to reach Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, anyone alive before the clones turned. Neither path was safe. Both were too late for someone. Throughout the capital, the first betrayals exploded. Temple guards opened fire on Jedi they had served beside. Gunships banked toward the temple spires. Shock troopers sealed Senate routes and began arresting aides, clerks, and guards who had seen too much. The heart of the Republic was eating itself before dawn. Ahsoka reached the central relay and forced Palpatine's recordings onto public channels. Holograms burst across government systems, revealing his hidden chambers, his Sith identity, and the duel that ended him. She did not have a perfect narrative. She had something stronger. Proof. Across Coruscant, officers stared. Senators went pale. Civilian networks erupted in panic. For the first time, the name Darth Sidious entered the light. But proof did not stop blaster fire. At the Jedi Temple, clone battalions were already advancing. Some hesitated at the broadcast. Others marched anyway, the command inside them stronger than reason. Jedi defenders met them on the steps as alarms screamed into the morning sky. Ahsoka looked across the city and realized Palpatine had planned for one final victory. The trap held. If the Republic survived him at all, it would have to fight through the blood he had already set in motion. Ahsoka looked across the city and realized Palpatine had planned for one final victory. The trap held. If the Republic survived him at all, it would have to fight through the blood he had already set in motion. Order 66 landed like a fracture spreading through the Republic at once. On some worlds, clones obeyed without hesitation, turning on Jedi generals in the middle of battle. On others, the broadcast from Coruscant reached them first. They saw Palpatine's face twisted by the dark side. They saw Ahsoka standing over the dead architect of the war. For the first time, some soldiers questioned the command inside their own heads. That hesitation changed everything. The war deepened. For the first time, the Purge met resistance among clones. On Kashyyyk, Yoda sensed betrayal an instant before it struck and cut down troopers near him. On Utapau, Obi-Wan survived because Commander Cody delayed a few seconds, long enough for doubt to break the ambush. On Felucia, Aayla Secura escaped the first volley when one clone shouted a warning he did not fully understand why he had given. The Purge still came. Jedi still died, but not as many, not fast enough, not the way Sidious had designed. On Coruscant, Ahsoka reached the temple before the gates fell. What she found was resistance being born in real time. Masters fought beside Padawans, temple staff armed younglings, and sealed inner halls. Some clone units, shaken by the public proof of Palpatine's identity, refused to fire and were cut down by their own brothers for hesitation. Anakin arrived from the opposite flank, bringing guards and Senate security with him. For the first time since the war began, Jedi and Defenders stood together against the same enemy. It was not enough to save everyone. It was enough to stop the temple from becoming a grave in one night. Meanwhile, the Republic began to split at the top. Bail Organa demanded an emergency inquiry. Mon Mothma called for military shutdowns. Mas Amedda tried to seize control in Palpatine's name, only to discover that fear worked less well when the tyrant behind it was dead. Still, the danger had not passed. Too much had already broken. With Sidious gone, chaos rushed in to fill the void. Loyalists wanted revenge. Jedi wanted answers. Clones were breaking under commands they no longer trusted. And in the middle of it all stood Anakin Skywalker, shaken to his core, staring at the ruin of a future he had almost embraced. Ahsoka had exposed the monster. Now Anakin had to decide what kind of man he would be without him, soon. And in the middle of it all stood Anakin Skywalker, shaken to his core, staring at the ruin of a future he had almost embraced. Ahsoka had exposed the monster. Now Anakin had to decide what kind of man he would be without him, soon. Without Palpatine whispering in his ear, Anakin Skywalker faced something more terrifying than the dark side. He faced himself. Every fear he had fed in silence now stood in the open. His distrust of the Council. His anger at being held back. His life with Padme. His need to control death before it touched the people he loved. Palpatine had not created those wounds. He had only sharpened them. That truth hit Anakin hardest when Ahsoka confronted him in the ruined Temple Med Center. Around them, healers moved between the wounded. Smoke drifted through cracked stone. Younglings sat in silence, wrapped in blankets, watching every adult for signs the nightmare was truly over. There, with survivors all around them, Anakin could no longer pretend this was someone else's war. Ahsoka did not accuse him of crimes not committed. That was what made her words hit harder. She told him the future had bent around one choice. If Palpatine had reached him first, everything would have burned. The Temple, the Order, Padme, maybe the Republic itself. That future died because someone got there before the Sith could close his hand. Anakin tried to defend himself at first. He spoke of visions, of losing people, of how the Council never trusted him to help carry what he felt. Ahsoka listened, then answered with brutal calm. Fear was real, pain was real, but neither gave him the right to become a weapon for a monster. That was when Padme arrived. She had seen the Senate recordings. She had seen Coruscant burn. She had seen how close the galaxy had come to dictatorship and slaughter. When Anakin looked at her, he expected comfort. He found honesty. She told him she still loved him. She also told him love was not the same as surrender. If he wanted a future with her, it would not be built on secrets or fear. It would be built on truth, or it would not exist at all. For the first time in years, Anakin stopped reaching for answers. He knelt beside a wounded youngling and saw in that face the cost of every choice still ahead. He had not fallen, not yet, but staying standing would take more strength than any battle had ever demanded. Outside, the Republic was choosing its next shape, and whether Anakin helped save it or helped break it would be decided very soon now. He knelt beside a wounded youngling and saw in that face the cost of every choice still ahead. Outside, the Republic was choosing its next shape, and whether Anakin helped save it or helped break it would be decided very soon now. Palpatine was dead, but the Republic he had poisoned did not heal overnight. His fall created a vacuum so dangerous that every power in the galaxy rushed to fill it. Some senators demanded emergency military rule until the clone crisis ended. Some worlds threatened secession rather than trust Coruscant again. Banking interests, corporate allies, and loyalists began destroying records before investigators could reach them. The Sith Lord was gone. Damage remained. That was the challenge waiting for the Jedi. They had survived the Purge, but survival was not victory. The temple stood scarred. Too many masters were dead. Too many citizens had watched the Order become the center of another war. Even with proof of Palpatine's deception, trust would not return in a single speech. It would have to be earned, world by world. Yoda understood that before anyone else. He refused every call to seize control. The Jedi would not replace one frightened regime with another. Instead, he ordered the survivors to defend relief corridors, protect investigations, and keep the peace where government had collapsed. For the first time in generations, the Order would serve without ruling. Ahsoka became the unexpected symbol of that new path. She was not a council master. She was not even formally Jedi. Yet she had seen the truth, acted alone, and saved the galaxy from its future. Citizens trusted her because she had no throne. Survivors followed her because she had faced fear without becoming it. Anakin chose to remain, but not as a hero. He offered testimony. He opened Palpatine's hidden channels. He admitted how close he had come to falling. It was not redemption. It was a beginning. Obi-Wan stayed near him, not as a jailer, but as the friend who believed the best parts of him were worth saving. Meanwhile, the Senate prepared for the hardest vote in its history. Not who would rule next, but what the Republic would become after learning how easily it had been manipulated. Freedom or control. Reform or collapse. Hope or fear. On the eve of that decision, Ahsoka stood beneath the damaged temple spires and looked over a city still marked by smoke. She had defeated Palpatine, but saving the future was harder than winning the fight. As the sun rose over Coruscant, the galaxy waited to see whether the Republic could become something better than the empire it had almost become. She had defeated Palpatine, but saving the future was harder than winning the fight. As the sun rose over Coruscant, the galaxy waited to see whether the Republic could become something better than the empire it had almost become.